Letter 76 of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, Thebes, March 17, 1866. Dearest Alick, the high winds have begun with a vengeance, and a great bore they are. I went a few days ago out to Medarnoot, and lunched in Mustapha's tent among his bean harvest. I was immensely amused by the man who went with me on to Medarnoot, one Sherif, formerly an illustrious robber, now a watchman and a very honest man. He rode a donkey about the size of Sterling's wee pony, and I laughed and said, the man should carry the ass. No sooner said than done. Sherif dismounted, or rather let his beast down from between his legs, shouldered the donkey, and ran on. His way of keeping awake is original. The nights are still cold, so he takes off all his clothes, rolls them up, and lays them under his head, and the cold keeps him quite lively. I never saw so powerful, active, and healthy an animal. He was full of stories how he had had 1,000 stripes of the courbash on his feet, and 500 on his loins at one go. Why? I asked. Why, I stuck a knife into a cawass who ordered me to carry watermelons. I said I was not his donkey. He called me worse. My blood got up, and the Pasha to whom the cawass belonged beat me. Oh, it was all right, and I did not say ach once, did I? Addressing another. He clearly bore no malice, as he felt no shame. He has a grand romance about a city 2 days' journey from here, in the desert, which no one finds but by chance, after losing his way, and where the ground is strewed with valuable antiquities. I laughed, and said, your father would have seen gold and jewels. True, said he, when I was young men spit on a statue or the like, when they turned it up digging, and now it is a fortune to find one. End of Letter 76. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. 7 of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, March 31st, 1866. Dearest Alick, as for me I am much better again, the cough has subsided, I really think the Arab specific, camel's milk, has done me great good. I have mended ever since I took it. It has the merit of being quite delicious. Yesterday I was much amused, when I went for my afternoon's drink, to find Sherif in a great taking at having been robbed by a woman under his very nose. He saw her gathering hummuz from a field under his charge, and went to order her off, whereupon she coolly dropped the end of her bourda which covered the head and shoulders, effectually preventing him from going near her, made up her bundle and walked off. His respect for the hareem did not, however, induce him to refrain from strong language. M. Brune has made very pretty drawings of the mosque here, both outside and in. It is a very good specimen of modern Arab architecture, and he won't believe it could be built without ground plan, elevations, etc., which amuses the people here, who build without any such inventions. The harvest here is splendid this year, such beans and wheat, and prices have fallen considerably in both, but meat, butter, etc., remain very dear. My fame as a Hakimah has become far too great, and on market days I have to shut up shop. Yesterday a very handsome woman came for medicine to make her beautiful, as her husband had married another who teased her, and he rather neglected her. And a man offered me a camel load of wheat if I would read something over him and his wife to make them have children. I don't try to explain to them how very irrational they are, but use the more intelligent argument that all such practices savour of the Ebu Erika, equivalent to black art, and are haram to the greatest extent. Besides, I add, being all lies into the bargain. The applicants for child making and charm reading are Copts or Muslims, quite in equal numbers, and appear alike indifferent as to what book, but all but one have been women, the men are generally perfectly rational about medicine and diet. I find there is a good deal of discontent among the Copts with regard to their priests and many of their old customs. Several young men have let out to me at a great rate about the folly of their fasts, and the badness and ignorance of their priests. I believe many turn Muslim from a real conviction that it is a better religion than their own, and not, as I at first thought, merely from interest. Indeed, they seldom gain much by it, and often suffer tremendous persecution from their families. Even they do not escape the rationalizing tendencies now abroad in Christendom. Then their early and indissoluble marriages are felt to be a hardship. A boy is married at 8 years old, perhaps to his cousin aged 17, I know one here in that case, and when he grows up he wishes it had been let alone. A clever lad of 17 propounded to me his dissatisfaction, and seemed to lean to Islam. I gave him an Arabic New Testament, and told him to read that first, and judge for himself whether he could not still conform to the church of his own people, and inwardly believe and try to follow the Gospels. I told him it was what most Christians had to do, as every man could not make a sect for himself, while few could believe everything in any church. I suppose I ought to have offered him the 39 Articles, and thus have made a Muslim of him out of hand. He pushed me a little hard about several matters, which he says he does not find in the book, but on the whole he is well satisfied with my advice. Coptic Palm Sunday, April 1st. We hear that Fadil Pasha received orders at Assouan to go up to Khartoum in Giafar Pasha's place. It is a civil way of killing a fat old Turk if it is true. He was here a week or two ago. My informant is one of my old crew who was in Fadil Pasha's boat. I shall wait to get a woman servant till I go to Cairo, the women here cannot iron or sew. So, meanwhile, the wife of Abdel el Kader does my washing, and Omar irons, and we get along capitally. Little Achmet waits, etc., and I think I am more comfortable so than if I had a maid. It would be of no use to buy a slave, as the trouble of teaching her would be greater than the work she would do for me. My medical reputation has become far too great, and all my common drugs, Epsom salts, senna, aloes, rhubarb, quassia, run short. Especially do all the poor, tiresome, ugly old women adore me, and bore me with their aches and pains. They are always the doctor's greatest plague. The mark of confidence is that they now bring the sick children, which was never known before, I believe, in these parts. I am sure it would pay a European doctor to set up here, the people would pay him a little, and there would be good profit from the boats in the winter. I got turkeys when they were worth 6 or 8 shillings apiece in the market, and they were forced upon me by the fellaheen. I must seal this up for fear the boat should come, it will only pick up Monsieur Brune and go on. End of letter 77. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. 78 of Letters from Egypt, by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mrs. Ross, Eid el Kebir, Wednesday, April, 1867. Dearest Janet, I had not heard a word of Henry's illness till Mr. Palgrave arrived and told me, and also that he was better. Alhamdulillah! I only hope that you are not knocked up, my darling. I am not ill, but still feel unaccountably weak and listless. I don't cough much, and have got fatter on my régime of camel's milk, so I hope I may get over the languor. The box has not made its appearance. What a clever fellow Mr. Palgrave is! I never knew such a hand at languages. The folks here are in admiration at his Arabic. I hope you will see Monsieur Brune. I am sure you would like him. He is a very accomplished and gentlemanly man. You have never told me your plans for this year, or whether I shall find you when I go down. The last 3 days the great heat has begun, and I am accordingly feeling better. I have just come home from the Bairam early prayer out in the burial place, at which Palgrave also assisted. He is unwell, and tells me he leaves Luxor to morrow morning. I shall stay on till I am too hot here, as evidently the summer suits me. Many thanks for Miss Berry and for the wine, which makes a very pleasant change from the rather bad claret I have got. Palgrave's book I have read through hard, as he wished to take it back for you. It is very amusing. If you come here next winter Mustapha hopes you will bring a saddle, and ride all his horses. I think I could get you a very good horse from a certain Sheykh Abdallah here. Well, I must say good-bye. Kalu sana inti taib. Love to Henry. End of letter 78. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. 79 of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. into the public domain. To Mrs. Austen, Bairam, April 1866. Dearest Mother, I write this to go down by Mr. Palgrave, who leaves to-morrow. He has been with Mustapha Bey conducting an inquiry into Mustapha Aga's business. Mariette Bey struck Mustapha, and I and some Americans took it ill and wrote a very strong complaint to our respective consuls. Mariette denied the blow and the words liar and son of a dog, so the American and English consuls sent up Palgrave as commissioner to inquire into the affair, and the Pasha sent Mustapha Bey with him. Palgrave is very amusing, of course, and his knowledge of languages is wonderful. Sheykh Yussuf says few ulema know as much of the literature and niceties of grammar and composition. Mustapha Bey is a darling, he knew several friends of mine, Hassan Effendi, Mustapha Bey Soubky, and others, so we were friends directly. I have not yet got a woman servant, but I don't miss it at all. Little Achmet is very handy, Mohammed's slave girl washes, and Omar irons and cleans the house and does housemaid, and I have kept on the meek cook, Abd el Kader, whom I took while the Frenchman was here. I had not the heart to send him away, he is such a mesquin. He was a smart travelling waiter, but his brother died, leaving a termagant widow with 4 children, and poor Abd el Kader felt it his duty to bend his neck to the yoke, married her, and has 2 more children. He is a most worthy, sickly, terrified creature. I have heard that a decent Copt here wants to sell a black woman, owing to reverses of fortune, and that she might suit me. Sheykh Yussuf is to negotiate the affair and to see if the woman herself likes me for a mistress, and I am to have her on trial for a time, and if I like her and she me, Sheykh Yussuf will buy her with my money in his name. I own I have very little scruple about the matter, as I should consider her price as an advance of 2 or 3 years' wages, and tear the paper of sale as soon as she had worked her price out, which I think would be a fair bargain. But I must see first whether Feltas, the Copt, really wants to sell her, or only to get a larger price than is fair, in which case I will wait till I go to Cairo. Anything is better than importing a European, who at once thinks one is at her mercy on account of the expense of the journey back. I went out this morning to the early prayer of Bairam day, held in the burial place. Mahmoud ibn Mustapha preached, but the boys and the hareem made such a noise behind us that I could not hear the sermon. The weather has set in hot these last days, and I am much the better. It seems strange that what makes others languid seems to strengthen me. I have been very weak and languid all the time, but the camel's milk has fattened me prodigiously, to Sherif's great delight, and the last hot days have begun to take away the miserable feeling of fatigue and languor. Palgrave is not well at all, and his little black boy fears he will die, and several people in the steamer are ill, but in Luxor there is no sickness to speak of, only chronic old women, so old and ugly and achy that I don't know what to do with them except listen to their complaints, which begin Ya Ragle. Ragel is man, so Ragle is the old Germanic Manin, and is the civil way of addressing a Saeedi woman. To one old body I gave a powder wrapped up in a fragment of the Sunday Review. She came back again and declared Mashallah, the hegab charm was a powerful one, for though she had not been able to wash off all the fine writing from the paper, even that little had done her a deal of good. I regret that I am unable to inform you what the subject of the article in the Saturday that had so drastic an effect. Goodbye, dearest Mother, I must go and take a sleep before the time of receiving the visits of today, the great festival. I was up before sunrise to see the prayer, so must have a siesta in a cool place. To-morrow morning early this will go. I hope you got a letter I sent 10 days or so ago. End of letter 79. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. From Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, Luxor, May 10, 1866. Dearest Alick, the real summer heat, the Skems el Kabir (big sun) has fairly set in, and of course I am all the better. You would give my camel a good backsheesh if you saw how prodigiously fat I have grown on her milk; it beats cod liver oil hollow. You can drink a gallon without feeling it, it is so easy of digestion. I have lent the dahabeah to Mustapha and to one or two more, to go to Keneh on business, and when she returns, which will be to day, I shall make ready to depart too, and drop down stream. Omar wants me to go down to Damietta, to amuse my mind and dilate my stomach a little, and I think of doing so. Palgrave was here about a fortnight ago, on Mustapha's and Mariette's business. 'By God, this English way is wonderful,' said a witness. 'That English Bey questioned me till my stomach came out.' I loved Mustapha Bey, who was with him, such a nice, kind, gentle creature, and very intelligent and full of good sense. I rejoice to hear that he returns my liking, and has declared himself one of my darweeshes. Talking of darweeshes reminds me of the festival of Sheykh Gibriel this year. I had forgotten the day, but in the evening some people came for me to go and eat some of the meat of the Sheykh, who is also a good patron of mine, they say, being a poor man's saint and of a humble spirit, it is said he favours me. There was plenty of meat and malakia and bread, and then zikirs of different kinds, and a gamel el fakara, assembly of the poor. Gama is the true word for mosque, i.e. meeting, which consists in a great circle of men seated thick on the ground, with two poets facing each other, who improvise religious verses. On this occasion, the rule of the game was to end each stanza with a word having the sound of Wahed, one, or El Had, the first. Thus one man sung, 'Let a man take heed how he walks,' etc., and 'Pray to God not to let him fall,' which sound like Had. And so they went on, each chanting a verse alternately. One gesticulated almost as much as an Italian and pronounced beautifully, the other was quiet, but had a nice voice, and altogether it was very pretty. At the end of each verse the people made a sort of chorus, which was sadly like the braying of asses. The zikr of the Edfou men was very curious. Our people did it quietly, and the moonsheed sang very sweetly. Indeed, the song of the moonsheed is the sugar in the sherbet to the zikr, said a man who came up when it was over, streaming with perspiration and radiant with smiles. Some day I will write to you the whole grand idea of a zikr, which is in fact an attempt to make present the communion of saints, living or dead. As I write arrives the Arousset er Raleigh, and my crew furl her big sail quite Bristol fashion. My men have come together again, some from Nubia and some from the Delta, and I shall go down with my old lot. Omar and Achmet have implored me not to take another maid at all. They say they live like Pashas now they have only the lady to please, that it will be a pleasure to lick my shoes clean, whereas the boots of the Camerera were intolerable. The feeling of the Arab servants towards European colleagues is a little like that of niggers about mean whites, mixed hatred, fear, and scorn. The two have done so well to make me comfortable that I have no possible reason for insisting on encumbering myself with an old man of the sea in the shape of a maid, and the difference in cost is immense. The one dish of my dinner is ample relish to their bread and beans, while the cooking for a maid, and her beer and wine, cost a great deal. Omar irons my clothes very tidily, and little Achmet cleans the house as nicely as possible. I own I am quite as much relieved by the absence of the civilized elements as my retainers are. Did I describe the Coptic Good Friday? Imagine 450 rekahs in church! I have seen many queer things, but nothing half so queer as the bobbing of the Copts. I went the other day to the old church 6 or 8 miles off, where they buried the poor old bishop who died a week ago. Abu Khom, a Christian Shaheed martyr, is buried there. He appeared to Mustapha's father when lost in the desert, and took him safe home. On that occasion he was well mounted, and robed all in white, with a litham in over his face. No one dares to steal anything near his tomb, not one ear of corn. He revealed himself long ago to one of the descendants of Abu'l Hajjaj, and to this day every Copt who marries in Luxor gives a pair of fowls to the family of that Muslim in remember of Abu Khom. I shall leave Luxor in 5 or 6 days, and write now to stop all letters in Cairo. I don't know what to do with my sick, they come from 40 miles off, and sometimes 20 or 30 people sleep outside the house. I dined with the Maōhn last night, pot luck, and was much pleased. The dear old lady was so vexed not to have a better dinner for me that she sent me a splendid tray of baklava this morning to make up for it. End of letter 80. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Maurice Duff Gordon, Cairo, June 22, 1866. Maurice, my darling, I send you a Roman coin which a man gave me as a fee for medical attendance. I hope you will like it for your watch chain. I made our Coptic goldsmith bore a hole in it. Why don't you write to me, you young rascal? I am now living in my boat, and I often wish for you here to donkey ride about with me. I can't write you a proper letter now, as Omar is waiting to take this up to Mr. Palgrave with the drawings for your father. Omar desires his best salaam to you and Rainie, and is very much disappointed that you are not coming out in the winter to go up to Luxor. We had a hurricane coming down the Nile, and a boat behind us sank. We only lost an anchor, and had to wait and have it fished up by the fishermen of a neighbouring village. In places the water was so shallow that the men had to push the boat over by main force, and all went into the river. The captain and I shouted, "Islam el Islam," equivalent to "Heave away, boys!" There are splendid illuminations about to take place here, because the Pasha has got leave to make his youngest boy his successor, and people are ordered to rejoice, which they do with much grumbling. It will cost something enormous. End of Letter 81. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mrs. Austen, off Boulak, Cairo, July 10, 1866. Dearest Mutter, I am much better again. My cold went off without a violent illness, and I was only weak and nervous. I am very comfortable here, anchored off Boulak, with my Rais and one sailor who cleans and washes my clothes, which Omar irons, as at Luxor. He found the washerwoman here charged 5 francs a dozen for all small things, and more for dresses. A bad Hashash boy turned Achmet's head, who ran away for 2 days and spent $1 in riotous living. He returned penitent, and got no fatted calf, but dry bread and a confiscation of his new clothes. The heat, when I left Luxor, was prodigious. I was detained 3 days by the death of Sheykh Yussuf's poor little wife and baby, in childbirth, so I was forced to stay and eat the funeral feast, and be present at the Khatma, reading of the Koran on the 3rd night, or it would not have seemed kind. The Cadi gave me a very curious prayer book, the Guide of the Faithful, written in Darfur, in beautiful characters, with very singular decorations, and in splendid binding. It contains the names of all the prophets, and of the 100 appellations of Muhammad, and is therefore a powerful hagab or talisman. He requested me to never give it away, and always keep it with me. Such books cannot be bought with money at all. I also bought a most beautiful hagab of cornelian set in enamel, the verse of the throne splendidly engraved, and dated 250 years ago. I sent over by Palgrave to Alick Monsieur Brun's lovely drawings of Luxor and Karnak, and to Maurice a gold coin which I received as a fee from an old Bedawi. It was so hot that I could not face the ride up to Keneh, when all my friends there came to fetch me, nor could I go to Siout. I never felt such heat. At Beni Suef I went to see our Maōhn's daughter, married to another Maōhn there. It was a pleasant visit. The master of the house was out, and his mother and wife received me like one of the family. Such a pretty woman and such darling children! A pale little slight girl of 5, a sturdy boy of 4, and a baby of 1 year old. The eager hospitality of the little creatures was quite touching. The little girl asked to have on her best frock, and then she stood before me and fanned me seriously and diligently, and asked every now and then, "Shall I make thee a sherbet? Shall I bring thee a coffee?" And then questions about grandpapa and grandmamma, and Abd el Hamid and Abd el Fattah, while the boy sat on his heels before me and asked questions about my family in his baby talk, and assured me it was a good day to him, and wanted me to stay 3 days, and to sleep with them. Their father came in and gave each an ashara, 10 fadas, 1/2 piastre. which, after consulting together, they tied in the corner of my handkerchief to spend on my journey. The little girl took such care of my hat and gloves and shoes, all very strange garments to her, but politeness was stronger than curiosity with the little things. I breakfasted with them all day, and found much cookery going on for me. I took a doll for my friend Oyusha, and some sugar plums for Mohammed, but they laid them aside in order to devote themselves to the stranger, all quietly and with no sort of show off or obtrusiveness. Even the baby seemed to have the instinct of hospitality and was full of smiles. It was all of a piece with the good old lady, their grandmother at Luxor, who wanted to wash my clothes for me herself, because I said the black slave of Mohammed washed badly. Remember that to do menial offices for a guest is an honour and a pleasure, and not derogatory at all here. The ladies cook for you, and say, I will cook my best for thee. The worst is that they stuff one so. Little Ayesha asked after my children, and said, May God preserve them for thee. Tell the little girl that Mohammed and I love her from afar off. Whereupon Mohammed declared that in a few years, please God, when he should be Balal (marriageable), he would marry her and live with me. When I went back to the boat the Effendi was ill with asthma, and I would not let him go with me in the heat. A polite man accompanies an honoured guest back to his house or boat, or tent. So the little boy volunteered, and we rode off on the Effendi's donkey, which I had to bestride, with Mohammed on the hump of the saddle before me. He was delighted with the boat of course, and romped and played about till we sailed, when his slave took him home. Those children gave me a happy day with their earnest, gracious hospitality. July 14th. Since I wrote this I have had the boat topsy-turvy, with a carpenter and a Menegget cushion stuffer, and had not a corner even to write in. I am better, but still cough every morning. I am, however, much better, and have got quite over the nervous depression which made me feel unable and ashamed to write. My young carpenter, a Christian, half Syrian, half Copt, of the Greek rite, and altogether a Cairene, would have pleased you. He would not work on Sunday, but instead came mounted on a splendid tall black donkey, and handsomely dressed, to pay me a visit, and go out with me for a ride. So he, I, and Omar went up to the Sittee Lady Zeyneb's mosque to inquire for Mustapha Bey Soubky, the Hakeem Pasha whom I had known at Luxor. I was told by the porter of the mosque to seek him at the shop of a certain grocer, his particular friend, where he sits every evening. On going there we found the shop with its lid shut down. A shop is like a box laid on its side with the lid pulled up when open and dropped when shut, as big as a cobbler's stall in Europe. The young grocer was being married, and Mustapha Bey was ill. So I went to his house in the quarter, such narrow streets, and was shown up by a young eunuch into the hareem, and found my old friend very poorly, but spent a pleasant evening with him, his young wife, a Georgian slave whom he had married, his daughter by a former wife, whom he had married while he was 14, and the female dwarf buffoon of the Valida Pasha, Ismail's mother, whose heart I won by rising to her, because she was so old and deformed. The other women laughed, but the little old dwarf liked it. She was a Circassian and seemed clever. You see how the 1001 Nights are quite true and real, how great beys sit with grocers, and carpenters have no hesitation in offering civility to Nas Omra, noble people. This is what makes Arab society quite unintelligible and impossible to most Europeans. My carpenter's boy was the son of a Munshied singer in the mosque, and at night he used to sit and warble to us, with his little baby voice and round innocent face, the most violent love songs. He was about 8 years old, and sang with wonderful finish and precision, but no expression, until I asked him for a sacred song, which begins, I cannot sleep for longing for thee, O full moon, the prophet, and then the little chap warmed to his work, and the feeling came out. Palgrave has left in my charge a black boy of his, now at Luxor, where he left him very ill, with Mustapha Aga. The child told me he was a Nyan cannibal, but he did not look ogreish. I have written to Mustapha to send him me by the first opportunity. Achmet has quite recovered his temper, and I do so much better without a maid that I shall remain so. The difference in expense is enormous, and the peace and quiet a still greater gain. No more grumbling and exigencies and worry. Omar irons very fairly, and the sailor washes well enough, and I don't want toilette. Anyhow, I would rather wear a sack than try the experiment again. An uneducated, coarse-minded European is too disturbing an element in the family life of Easterns; the sort of filial relation, at once familiar and reverential of servants to a master like they, is odious to English and still more to French servants. If I fall in with an Arab or Abyssinian woman to suit me I will take her, but of course it is rare; a raw slave can do nothing, nor can a fellaha, and a Cairo woman is bored to death up in the Saeed. As to care and attention, I want for nothing. Omar does everything well and with pride and pleasure, and is delighted at the saving of expense in wine, beer, meat, etc., etc. One feeds 6 or 8 Arabs well with the money for one European. While the carpenter, his boy, and 2 Meneggets were here, a very moderate dish of vegetables, stewed with a pound of meat, was put before me, followed by a chicken or a pigeon for me alone. The stew was then set on the ground to all the men, and 2 loaves of a piastre each, to every one, a jar of water, and alhamdulillah 4 men and 2 boys had dined handsomely. At breakfast a watermelon and another loaf apiece, and a cup of coffee all round, and I passed for a true Arab in hospitality. Of course no European can live so, and they despise the Arabs for doing it, while the Arab servant is not flattered at seeing the European get all sorts of costly luxuries which he thinks unnecessary; besides he has to stand on the defensive in order not to be made a drudge by his European fellow servant, and despised for being one, so he leaves undone all sorts of things which he does with alacrity when it is for the master only. What Omar does now seems wonderful, but he says he feels like the Sultan now he has only me to please. July 15th. Last night came the 2 Meneggets to pay a friendly visit, and sat and told stories, so I ordered coffee, and one took his sugar out of his pocket to put in his cup, which made me laugh inwardly. He told a fisherman who stopped his boat alongside for a little conversation, the story of 2 fishermen, the one a Jew, the other a Muslim, who were partners in the time of the Arab prophet, upon whom be blessing and peace. The Jew, when he flung his nets, called on the prophet of the Jews, and hauled it up full of fish every time; then the Muslim called on our master Mohammed, etc., etc., and hauled up each time only stones, until the Jew said, "Depart, O man, thou bringest us misfortune; shall I continue to take half thy stones, and give thee half my fish? Not so." So the Muslim went to our master Mohammed and said, "Behold, I mention thy name when I cast my net, and I catch only stones and calamity. How is this?" But the blessed prophet said to him, "Because thy stomach is black inwardly, and thou thoughtest to sell thy fish at an unfair price, and to defraud thy partner and the people, while the Jew's heart was clean towards thee and the people, and therefore God listened to him rather than to thee." I hope our fisherman was edified by this fine moral. I also had good stories from the chief driver of Cairo, who came to examine the bottom of my boat, and told me, in a whisper, a long tale of his grandfather's descent below the waters of the Nile, into the land of the people who lived there, and keep tame crocodiles to hunt fish for them. They gave him a sleeveful of fishes' scales, and told him never to return, and not to tell about them, but when he got home the scales had turned to money. But most wonderful of all was Haggi Hannah's story of her own life, and the journey of Omar's mother carrying her old mother in a basket on her head from Damietta to Alexandria, and dragging Omar, then a very little boy, by the hand. The energy of many women here is amazing. The Nile is rising fast, and the Beshir is coming, the messenger who precedes the Hajj, and brings letters. Beshir is good tidings, to coin a word. Many hearts are lightened and many half broken to day. I shall go up to the Abbasiyeh to meet the Mahmal and see the Hajis arrive. Next Friday I must take my boat out of the water, or at least heel her over, to repair the bad places made at Alexandria. It seems I once cured a Rais of the Pasha's of dysentery at Minieh, and he has not forgotten it, though I had, so Rais Awad will give me a good place on the Pasha's bank, and lend ropes and levers which will save a good deal of expense and trouble. I shall move out all the things and myself into a boat of Zubayda's for 4 or 5 days, and stay alongside to superintend my caulkers. Miss Berry is dull no doubt, but few books seem dull to me now, I can tell you, and I was much delighted with such a pièce de résistance. Miss Eden I don't wish for; that sort of theatre burlesque view of the customs of a strange country is inexpressibly tedious to one who is familiar with the akin to it. There is plenty of real fun to be had here, but that sort is only funny to Cockneys. I want to read Baker's book very much. I am much pleased with Abd el Kader's book which Dozon sent me, and I want the original dreadfully for Sheykh Yussuf, to show him that he and I are supported by such an authority as the great Ameer in our notions about the real unity of the faith. The book is a curious mixture of good sense and credulity, quite Arab of the Arabs. I will write a paper on the popular beliefs of Egypt; it will be curious, I think. By the way, I see in the papers and reviews speculations as to some imaginary Mohammedan conspiracy, because of the very great number of pilgrims last year from all parts to Mecca. C'est chercher midi à 14 heures. Last year, the day of Abraham's sacrifice, and therefore the day of the pilgrimage, the Sermon on the Mount Arafat, fell on a Friday, and when that happens there is always a rush, owing to the popular notion that the Hajj al-Gumma, pilgrimage of the Friday, is 7 times blessed, or even equivalent to making it 7 times in ordinary years. As any beggar in the street could tell a man this, it may give you some notion of how absurdly people make theories out of nothing for want of a little common sense. The Moolid en Nebi, Festival of the Prophet, has just begun. I am to have a place in the great derweesh's tent to see the Dóseh. The Nile is rising fast; we shall kill the poor little Luxor black lamb on the day of the opening of the canal, and have a fantasia at night, only I grieve for my little white pussy who sleeps every night on the ablooks the lamb's woolly neck, and loves him dearly. Pussy, Bish is Arabic for puss, was the gift of a Coptic boy at Luxor and is wonderfully famous, and as much more active and lissome than a European cat as an Arab is than an Englishman. She and Achmet and Ablook have fine games of romps. Omar has set his heart on an English signet ring with an oval stone to engrave his name on. Here, you know, they sign the papers with a signet, not with a pen. It must be solid to stand hard work. Well, I must finish this endless letter. Here comes such a bouquet from the Pasha's garden; somebody's sister's son is servant to the chief eunuch and brings it to me. A great round of scarlet, surrounded with white and green, and with tall reeds, on which are threaded single tube-rose flowers, rising out of it so as to figure a huge flower with white pistils. Arab gardeners beat French flower girls in bouquets. End of Letter 82. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. From Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, Cairo, July 17, 1866. Dearest Alick, I am perfectly comfortable now with my aquatic ménage. The Rais is very well behaved and steady and careful, and the sort of Caliban of a sailor is a very worthy savage. Omar, of course, is hard worked, what with going to market, cooking, cleaning, ironing, and generally keeping everything in nice order, but he won't hear of a maid of any sort. No wonder. A clever old Rais has just come and overhauled the bottom of the boat, and says he can mend her without taking her out of the water. We shall see; it will be great luck if he can. As I am the river doctor, all the sailoring men are glad to do me a civility. We have had the hottest of summers; it is now 98° in the cabin. I have felt very unwell, but my blue devils are quite gone, and I am altogether better. What a miserable war it is in Europe! I am most anxious for the next papers. Here it is money misery; the Pasha is something like bankrupt, and no one has had a day's pay these 3 months; even pensions of 60 piastres a month, 7 shillings, to poor old female slaves of Muhammad Ali's, are stopped. August 4. The heat is and has been something fearful; we are all panting and puffing. I can't think what Palgrave meant about my being tired of poor old Egypt. I am very happy and comfortable, only I felt rather weak and poorly this year, and sometimes, I suppose, rather wakum, as the Arabs say, after you and the children. The heat, too, has made me lazy; it is 110° in the cabin and 96 at night. I saw the Moolid en Nebi, Festival of the Prophet, and the wonderful Dóseh treading; it is an awful sight, so many men drunk with religious ardour. I also went to a Turkish hareem, where my Darweesh friends sent me; it is just like a tea party at Hampton Court, only handsomer, not as to the ladies, but the clothes, furniture, and jewels, and not a bit like the description in Mrs. Lott's most extraordinary book. Nothing is so clean as a Turkish hareem; the furniture is Dutch, as to cleanliness, and their persons only like themselves; but oh, how dull and triste it all seemed! One nice lady said to me, "If I had a husband and children like thee, I would die 100 times rather than leave them for an hour." Another envied me the power of going into the street and seeing the Dóseh. She had never seen it and never would. To morrow Olagnier will dine and spend the night here, to see the cutting of the canal and the Bride of the Nile on Monday morning. We shall sail up to Old Cairo in the evening with the bride's boat, also Hajjee Hannah is coming for the fantasia; after the high Nile we shall take the boat out and caulk her, and then, if the excessive heat continues, I rather think of a month's jaunt to Beyrout just to freshen me up. Hajjee Ali is there, with all his travelling materials and tents, so I need only take Omar and a bath and carpet bag. If the weather gets cool I shall stay in my boat. The heat is far more oppressive here than it was at Luxor 2 years ago; it is not so dry. The Viceroy is afraid of cholera, and worried the poor Hajjees this year with most useless quarantine. The Mahmal was smuggled into Cairo before sunrise, without the usual honours, and all sightseers and holiday makers disappointed, and all good Muslims deeply offended. The idea that the Pasha has turned Christian or even Jew is spreading fast; I hear it on all sides. The new firman illegitimizing so many of his children is of course just as agreeable to a sincere Muslim as a law sanctioning polygamy for our royal family would be to us. End of Letter 83. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, off Boulak, August 20th, 1866. Dearest Alick, since I wrote I have had a bad bilious attack, which has, of course, aggravated my cough. Everyone has had the same, and most far worse than I, but I was very wretched and most shamefully cross. Omar said, "That is not you but the sickness," when I found fault with everything, and it was very true. I am still seedy; also I am beyond measure exasperated about my boat. I went up to the Ata el Khalig cutting of the canal, to see the great sight of the Bride of the Nile, a lovely spectacle, and on returning we all but sank. I got out into a boat of Zubayda's with all my goods, and we hauled up my boat and found her bottom rotten from stem to stern. So here am I in the midst of wood merchants, sawyers, etc., etc., rebuilding her bottom. My Reis said he had carried her on his head all this time, but what could such a one as he say against the word of a Hagawa, like Ross's storekeeper? When the English cheat each other there remains nothing but to seek refuge with God. Omar buys the wood and superintends, together with the Reis, and the builders seem good workmen and fair dealing. I pay day by day, and have a scribe to keep the accounts. If I get out of it for £150 I shall think Omar has done wonders, for every atom has to be new. I never saw anything so rotten afloat. If I had gone up the cataract I should never have come down alive; it is a marvel we did not sink long ago. Mabrook, Palgrave's boy, has arrived and turns out well. He is a stout lubberly boy, with infinite good humour, and not at all stupid, and laughs a good real nigger yah, which brings the fresh breezes and lilac mountains of the Cape before me when I hear it. When I tell him to do anything he does it with strenuous care, and then asks Taib, is it well? And if I say yes he goes off, as Omar says, like a cannon in ladyship's face, in a guffaw of satisfaction. Achmet, who is half his size, orders him about and teaches him, with an air of extreme dignity, and says pityingly to me, "You see, O lady, he is quite new, quite green." Achmet, who had never seen a garment or any article of European life 2 years ago, is now a smart valet, with very distinct ideas of waiting at table, arranging my things, etc., and cooks quite cleverly. Arab boys are amazing. I have promoted him to wages, 1 napoleon a month, so now he will keep his family. He is about a head taller than Rainey. I intend to write a paper on the various festivals and customs of Copts and Muslims, but I must wait to see Abu Seyfain, near Luxor, the great Christian saint, where all go to be cured of possession, all mad people. The Viceroy wages steady war against all festivals and customs. The Mahmal was burked this year, and the fair at Tanta forbidden. Then the Europeans spoil it all; the Arabs no longer go to the Atel el Khalig, and at the Dóseh the Frangee carriages were like the Derby day. It is only up country that the real thing remains. To morrow my poor black sheep will be killed over the new prow of the boat, his blood streaked upon her, and his flesh sodden and eaten by all the workmen, to keep off the evil eye, and on the day she goes into the water, some Fikis will read the Koran in the cabin, and again there will be boiled mutton and bread. The Christian Ma'alimin, skilled workmen, hold to the ceremony of the sheep quite as much as the others, and always do it over a new house, boat, mill, water wheel, etc. Did I tell you Omar has another girl, about 2 months ago? His wife and babies are to come up from Alexandria to see him, for he will not leave me for a day, on account of my constantly being so ailing and weak. I hope if I die away from you all, you will do something for Omar for my sake. I cannot conceive what I should do without his faithful and loving care. I don't know why he is so devotedly fond of me, but he certainly does love me, as he says, like his mother, and moreover as a very affectionate son loves his other. How pleasant it would be if you could come, but please don't run any risks of fatigue or exposure to cold on your return. If you cannot come I shall go to Luxor early in October and send back the boat to let. I hear from Luxor that the people are all running away from the land, unable to pay triple taxes and eat bread. The ruin is universal. The poor Sheykhs el Beled, who had the honour of dining with the Viceroy at Minieh, have each had a squeeze politely administered. One poor devil I know had to make a present of 50 purses. How is my darling Rainie? I do so long for her earnest eyes at times, and I wonder if I shall ever be able to get back to you all again. I fear that breakdown at Soudan sent me down a great terrace. I have never lost the pain and the cough for a day since. I have not been out for an age, or seen anyone. Would you know the wife of your bosom in a pair of pink trousers and a Turkish tob? Such is my costume as I write. The woman who came to sew could not make a gown, so she made me a pair of trousers instead. Farewell, dearest, I hardly say how your hint of possibly coming has made me wish it, and yet I dread to persuade you. The great heat is quite over with the high Nile, and the air on the river fresh and cold at night even. End of letter 84. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, off Boulak, August 27, 1866. Dearest Alick, your letter of the 18th has this moment arrived. I am very glad to hear you are so much better. I am still seedyish, but no worse. Everybody is liver sick this year. I give calomel and jalap all round, except to myself. The last 2 or 3 days we have been in great tribulation about the boat. On Saturday her ribs were finished and the planking and caulking ready to be put on, when in the night up came the old Nile with a rush, and threatened to carry her off, but by the favour of Abu'l Hajjaj and Sheykh el Bastawi she was saved in this wise. You remember the tall old steersman who went with us to Bedrachein, and whom we thought so ill-conditioned. Well, he was in charge of a dahabieh close by, and he called up all the Raises and steersmen to help. O men of el Bastawi, this is our boat, i.e. we are the servants of her owner, and she is in our faces, and then he set the example, stripped and carried dust and hammered in piles all night, and by the morning she was surrounded by a dyke breast high. The longshoremen of Boulak were not a little surprised to see dignified Raises working for nothing like fellaheen. Meanwhile my 3 Ma'alimin, the chief builder, caulker and foreman, had also stayed all night with Omar and my Rais, who worked like the rest, and the Sheykh of all the boat builders went to visit every one of my Ma'alimin, who is his nephew, and hearing the case came down too at 1 in the morning and stayed till dawn. Then, just as the workmen passed, going to their respective jobs, he called to them and said, "Come finish this boat, it must be done by tomorrow night." Some men who objected and said they were going to the Pasha's dockyard, got a beating pro forma, and the end of it was that I found 46 men under my boat working like Afrits and Shaitans, when I went to see how all was going in the morning. The old Sheykh marked out a piece to each 4 men, and then said, "If that is not done tonight, O dogs, tomorrow I'll put on the hat," i.e. today I have beaten moderately like an Arab, but tomorrow, please God, I'll beat like a Frank and be mad with the stick. Gers und gut, the boat which yesterday morning was a skeleton, is now, at 4 p.m. today, finished, caulked, pitched, and all capitally done. If the Nile carries off the dyke she will float safe. The shore is covered with débris of other people's half finished boats, I believe. I owe the ardour of the Ma'alims and of the Sheykh of the builders to one of my absurd pieces of Arab civility. On the day when Omar killed poor Ablook, my black sheep, over the bows and straked his blood upon them, the 3 Ma'alimin came on board this boat to eat their dish, and I followed the old Arab fashion and ate out of the wooden dish with them and the Rais for luck, or rather for a blessing, as we say here, and it seems that this gave immense satisfaction. My Rais wept at the death of the black sheep, which used to follow him to the coffee shop and the market, and was to him as a son, he said, but he ate of him nevertheless. Omar surreptitiously picked out the best pieces for my dinner for 3 days, with his usual eye to economy, then lighted a fire of old wood, borrowed a cauldron of some darweeshes, cut up the sheep, added water and salt, onions and herbs, and boiled the sheep. Then the big washing copper, a large, round, flat tray like a sponging bath, was filled with bread broken in pieces, over which the broth was slowly poured till the bread was soaked. Next came a layer of boiled rice, on the top of that the pieces of boiled meat, and over all was poured butter, vinegar, and garlic boiled together. This is called feta, and is the orthodox dish of darweeshes, and given at all khatmas and other semi-religious, semi-festive, semi-charitable festivals. It is excellent and not expensive. I asked how many had eaten, and was told 130 men had blessed my hand. I expended 160 piastres on bread, butter, vinegar, etc., and the sheep was worth 2 napoleons, 3 napoleons in all, or less, for I ate for 2 days of the mutton. The 3 Ma'alims came on board this boat, as I said, and ate, and it was fine to hear us, how polite we were. A bit more, O Ma'alim? Praise be to God we have eaten well, we will return to our work. By the Prophet, coffee and a pipe! Truly thou art of the most noble people. O Ma'alim, ye have honoured us and rejoiced with us. Verily, this is a day white among days, etc. A very clever Egyptian engineer, a pupil of Whitworth's, who is living in a boat alongside mine, was much amused, and said, "Ah, you know how to manage them." I have learnt the story of the 2 dead bodies that hitched in my anchor chain some time ago. They were not Europeans as I thought, but Circassians, a young man and his mother. The mother used to take him to visit an officer's wife who had been brought up in the hareem of the Pasha's mother. The husband caught them, killed them, tied them together and flung them into the Nile near Rhoda, and gave himself into the hands of the police. All was of course hushed up. He goes to Fazoghlou, and I don't know what becomes of the slave girl, his wife. These sorts of things happen every day, as the bodies testify, among the Turks, but the Europeans never hear it. I heard it by a curious chance. September 4. My boat will soon be finished, and now will be as good as new. Omar has worked like a good one from daybreak till night, overlooking, buying all the materials, selling all the old wood and iron, etc., and has done capitally. I shall take a paper from my Ma'alims, who are all first-class men, to certify what they have done that the boat is as good as new. Goodah Effendi has kindly looked at her several times for me, and highly approves the work. I never saw men do a better day's work than those at the boat. It is pretty to see the carpenter holding the wood with one hand and one foot while he saws it, sitting on the ground, just like the old frescoes. Do you remember the picture of boat building in the tomb at Sakkara? Well, it is just the same, all done with the adze, but it is stout work they put into it, I can tell you. If you do not come, and I do not like to press you, I fear the fatigue for you and the return to the cold winter, I shall go to Luxor in a month or so, and send back the boat to let. I have a neighbour now, Goodah Effendi, an engineer, who studied and married in England. His wife is gone there with the children, and he is living in a boat close by, so he comes over of an evening very often, and I am glad of his company. He is a right good fellow and very intelligent. My best love to all at home. I've got a log from the cedars of Lebanon. My Muslim carpenter who smoothed the broken end swallowed the sawdust, because he believed Our Lady Mary had sat under the tree with our Lord Jesus. End of letter 85. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, off Boulak, September 21st, 1866. I am better now, and go on very comfortably with my two little boys. Omar is, from dawn till night at work at my boat, so I have only Mabrook and Achmet, and you would wonder to see how well I am served. Achmet cooks a very good dinner, and serves it and orders Mabrook about. Sometimes I whistle and hear Hayder ready from the water, and in tumbles Achmet, with the water running down his innocent nose and looking just like a little bronze Triton of a Renaissance fountain, with a blue shirt and white skull cap added. Mabrook is a big lubberly lad of the laugh and grow fat breed, clumsy but not stupid, and very good and docile. You would delight in his guffaws, and the merry games and hearty laughter of my ménage is very pleasant to me. Another boy swims over from Gooda's boat, his Achmet, and then there are games at piracy, and much stealing of red pots from the potters' boats. The joke is to snatch one under the owner's very nose, and swim off brandishing it, whereupon the boatman uses eloquent language, and the boys out hector him, and everybody is much amused. I only hope Palgrave won't come back from Sookum Kalla and fetch Mabrook, just as he has got clever, not at stealing jars, but in his work. He already washes my clothes very nicely indeed, his stout black arms are made for a washer boy. Achmet looked forward with great eagerness to your coming. He is mad to go to England, and in his heart planned to ingratiate himself with you, and go as a general's servant. He is very little, if at all, bigger than a child of 7, but an Arab boy ne doute de rien, and does serve admirably. What would an English respectable cook say to seeing 2 dishes and a sweet, cooked over a little old wood on a few bricks, by a baby in a blue shirt, and very well cooked too, and followed by incomparable coffee. You will be pleased to hear that your capital story of the London cabman has its exact counterpart here. O gracious God, what aileth thee, O Achmet my brother, and why is thy bosom contracted, that thou hast not once said to me, damn thy father, or son of a dog or pig, as thou art used to do? Can't you save up your holidays, and come for 4 months next winter with my Maurice? However, perhaps you would be bored on the Nile, I don't know. People either enjoy it rapturously, or are bored, I believe. I am glad to hear from Janet that you are well. I am much better. The carpenter will finish in the boat to day, then the painter begins, and in a week, Inshallah, I shall get back to her. End of letter 86. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mrs. Austen, off Boulak, September 21st, 1866. Dearest Mutter, I am a good deal better again, the weather is delightful, and the Nile in full flood, which makes the river scenery from the boat very beautiful. Alick made my mouth water with his description of his rides with Janet about the dear old Surrey country; having her with him seems to have quite set him up. I have seen nothing and nobody but my next boat neighbour, Gooda Effendi, as Omar has been at work all day in the boat, and I felt lazy and disinclined to go out alone. Big Hassan of the donkeys has grown too lazy to go about, and I don't care to go alone with a small boy here. However, I am out in the best of air all day, and am very well off. My 2 little boys are very diverting and serve me very well. The news from Europe is to my ignorant ideas désolant, a dégringolade back into military despotism, which would have excited indignation with us in our fathers' days, I think. I get lots of newspapers from Ross, which afterwards go to an Arab grocer, who reads the Times and the Saturday Review in his shop in the bazaar. What next? The cargo of books which Alick and you sent will be most acceptable for winter consumption. If I were a painter I would take up the Muslim traditions of Mary and Joseph. He was not a white-bearded old gentleman at all, you must know, but young, lovely, and pure as Our Lady herself. They were cousins, brought up together, and she avoided the light conversation of other girls, and used to go to the well with her jar, hand in hand with Joseph carrying his. After the angel Gabriel had announced to her the will of God, and blown into her sleeve, whereby she conceived the Spirit of God, Joseph saw her state with dismay, and resolved to kill her as was his duty as her nearest male relation. He followed her, knife in hand, meaning always to kill her at the next tree, and each time his heart failed him, until they reached the well and the tree under which the divine messenger stood once more and said, "Fear not, O Joseph, the daughter of thy uncle bears within her Isa, the Messiah, the Spirit of God." Joseph married his cousin without fear. Is it not pretty? Two types of youthful purity and piety, standing hand in hand before the angel. I think a painter might make something out of the soft-eyed Syrian boy with his jar on his shoulder, hers on the head, and the grave, modest maiden who shrank from all profane company. I now know all about Sheykh Saleem, and why he sits naked on the river bank, from a very high authority, a great Sheykh to whom it has been revealed. He was entrusted with the care of some of the holy she camels, like that on which the Prophet rode to Jerusalem in one night, and which are invisible to all but the elect, and he lost one, and now he is God's prisoner till she is found. A letter from Aunt Charley all about her own and Rainie's country life, school feasts, etc., made me quite cry, and brought before me, oh how vividly, the difference between East and West, not quite all to the advantage of home however, though mostly. What is pleasant here is the primitive ways. 3 times since I have been here lads of most respectable families of Luxor have come to ask hospitality, which consists in a place on the deck of the boat, and liberty to dip their bread in the common dish with my slave boy and Achmet. The bread they brought with them, bread and shelter, were not asked, as they slept sub dio. In England I must have refused the hospitality, on account of Jean and expense. The chief object to the lads was the respectability of being under my eye while away from their fathers, as a satisfaction to their families, and while they ate and slept like beggars, as we should say, they read their books and chatted with me, while I was out on deck, on perfectly equal terms, only paying the respect proper to my age. I thought of the orphanages and institutions, and all the countless difficulties of that sort, and wondered whether something was not to be said for this absence of civilization in knives, forks, beds, beer, and first and second tables above all. Of course climate has a good deal to do with the facility with which widows and orphans are absorbed here. Good bye, dearest Mutter. To-day is post day, and Rais Mohammed is about to trudge into town in such a darling white turban and such a grand black robe. His first wife, whom he was going to divorce for want of children, has brought him a son, and we jeer him a little about what he may find in Luxor from the second, and wish him a couple of dozen. End of Letter 87. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, Cairo, October 15, 1866. Dearest Alick, I have been back in my own boat 4 days, and most comfortable she is. I enlarged the saloon, and made a good writing table, and low, easy divans instead of benches, and added a sort of pantry and sleeping cabin in front, so that Omar has not to come through the saloon to sleep, and I have all the hareem part to myself. Inside there is a good large stern cabin and wash closet and 2 small cabins with beds, long enough even for you. Inshallah, you and Maurice will come next winter and go up the Nile and enjoy it with me. I intend to sail in 10 days and to send back the Urania to seek work for the winter. We had a very narrow escape of being flooded this year. I fear a good deal of damage has been done to the doura and cotton crops. It was sad to see the villagers close by here trying to pull up a little green doura as the Nile slowly swallowed up the fields. I was forced to flog Mabrook yesterday for smoking on the sly, a grave offence here on the part of a boy. It is considered disrespectful, so he was ordered with much parade to lie down, and Omar gave him 2 cuts with a rope's end, an apology for a flogging which would have made an Eton boy stare. The stick here is quite nominal, except in official hands. I can't say Mabrook seemed at all impressed, for he was laughing heartily with Omar in less than 10 minutes, but the affair was conducted with as much solemnity as an execution. Sheykh Stanley's friend, Gezawi, has married his negro slave to his own sister, on the plea that he was the best young man he knew. What would a Christian family say to such an arrangement? My boat is beautifully buoyant now, and has come up by the bows in fine style. I have not sailed her yet, but have no doubt she will walk well as the Arabs say. Omar got £10 by the sale of old wood and nails, and also gave me 2,000 piastres, nearly £12, which the workmen had given him as a sort of backsheesh. They all pay 1, 2, or 3 piastres daily to any wakeel (agent) who superintends; that is his profit, and it is enormous at that rate. I said, why did you not refuse it? But Omar replied they had pay enough after that reduction, which is always made from them, and that in his opinion therefore it came out of the master's pocket, and was cheatery. How people have been talking nonsense about Jamaica chez vous. I have little doubt Eyre did quite right, and still less doubt that the niggers have had enough of the sort of provocation which I well know to account for the outbreak. Baker's effusion is a poor business. There may be blacks like tigers, and whites too in London for that matter. I myself have seen at least 5 sorts of blacks, negroes not Arabs, more unlike each other than Swedes are unlike Spaniards, and many are just like ourselves. Of course they want governing with a strong hand, like all ignorant childish creatures. But I am fully convinced that custom and education are the only real differences between one set of men and another; their inner nature is all the same the world over. My Reis spoke a pretty parable the other day that I must needs write it. A Coptic Reis stole some of my wood, which we got back by force, and there was some reviling of the Nazarenes in consequence from Husayn and Ali, but Reis Mohammed said, not so, Girgis is a thief, it is true, but many Christians are honest, and behold all the people in the world are like soldiers, some wear red and some blue, some serve on foot, others on horseback, and some in ships, but all serve one Sultan, and each fights in the regiment in which the Sultan has placed him, and he who does his duty best is the best man, be his coat red or blue or black. I said, excellent words, O Reis, and fit to be spoken from the best of pulpits. It is surprising what happy sayings the people here hit upon; they cultivate talk for want of reading, and the consequence is great facility of narration and illustration. Everybody enforces his ideas like Christ, in parables. Hajjee Hannah told me 2 excellent fairy tales, which I will write for Rainie with some bowdlerizing, and several laughable stories, which I will leave unrecorded, as savouring too much of Boccaccio's manner, or that of the Queen of the Navarre. I told Achmet to sweep the floor after dinner just now; he hesitated and I called him again, what manner is this, not to sweep when I bid thee? By the most high God, said the boy, my hand shall not sweep in thy boat after sunset, O lady, I would rather have it cut off than sweep thee out of thy property. I found that you must not sweep at night, nor for 3 days after the departure of a guest whose return you desire, or the master of the house. Thinkest thou that my brother would sweep away the dust of thy feet from the floors at Luxor, continued Achmet, he would fear never to see thy fortunate face again. If you don't want to see your visitor again, you break a gullah (water jar) behind him as he leaves the house, and sweep away his footsteps. What a canard your papers have in Europe about a constitution here. I don't write any politics, it is all too dreary, and Cairo gossip is odious, as you may judge by the productions of Mesdames Oudarde and Lot. Only remember this, there is no law nor justice but the will or rather the caprice of one man. It is nearly impossible for any European to conceive such a state of things as really exists. Nothing but perfect familiarity with the governed, i.e. oppressed, class will teach it; however intimate a man may be with the rulers he will never fully take it in. I am à l'index here, and none of the people I know dare to come see me (Arab, I mean). It was whispered in my ear in the street by a friend I met. Ismail Pasha's chief pleasure is gossip, and a certain number of persons, chiefly Europeans, furnish him with it daily, true or false. If the farce of the constitution ever should be acted here it will be superb. Something like the consul going in state to ask the fellaheen what wages they got. I could tell you a little of the value of consular information, but what is the use? Europe is enchanted with the enlightened Pasha who has ruined this fine country. I long to see you and Rainie. I don't like to hope too much, but Inshallah next year I shall see you all. End of Letter 88. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. 9 of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, off Boulak, October 19, 1866. I shall soon sail up the river. Yesterday Said Mustapha arrived, who says that the Greeks are all gone, and the poor Austrian at Thebes is dead, so I shall represent Europe in my single person from Siout to, I suppose, Khartoum. You would delight in Mabrook. A man asked him the other day, after his flogging, if he would not run away, to see what he would say as alleged, I suspect he meant, to steal and sell him. I run away, to eat lentils like you, when my Effendi gives me meat and bread every day, and I eat such a lot? Is not that a delicious, practical view of liberty? The creature's enjoyment of life is quite a pleasure to witness, and he really works very well and with great alacrity. If Palgrave claims him, I think I must buy him. I hear sad accounts from the Saeed; the new taxes and the new levies of soldiers are driving the people to despair, and many are running away from the land, which will no longer feed them after paying all exactions, to join the Bedaween in the desert, which is just as if our peasantry turned gipsies. A man from Dishné visited me; the people there want me to settle in their village, and offer me a voluntary corvée if I will buy land, so many men to work for me 2 days a month each. I haven't a conception why. It is a place about 50 miles below Luxor, a large agricultural village. Omar's wife Mabrookah came here yesterday, a nice young woman, and the babies are fine children and very sweet tempered. She told me that the lion's head, which I sent down to Alexandria to go to you, was in her room when a neighbour of hers, who had never had a child, saw it, and at once conceived. The old image worship survives in the belief, which is all over Egypt, that the antiques (antiquities) can cure barrenness. Mabrookah was of course very smartly dressed, and the reckless way in which Eastern women treat their fine clothes gives them a grand air, which no Parisian duchess could hope to imitate; not that I think it a virtue, mind you, but some vices are genteel. Last night was a great Sheykh's fête, such drumming and singing, and ferrying across the river. The Nile is running down unusually fast, and I think I had better go soon, as the mud of Cairo is not so sweet as the mud of the upper land. End of Letter 89. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mrs. Austen, off Boulak, October 25, 1866. Dearest Mutter, I have got all ready, and shall sail on Saturday. My men have baked the bread, and received their wages to go to Luxor and bring the boat back to let. It is turning cold, but I feel none the worse for it, though I shall be glad to go. I've had a dreary worrying time here, and am tired of hearing all the meanness and wickedness which constitute the on dit here. Not that I hear much, but there is nothing else. I shall be best at Luxor now the winter has set in so early. You would laugh at such winter when one sits out all day under an awning in English summer clothes, and wants only 2 blankets at night, but all is comparative ici bas, and I call it cold, and Mabrook ceases to consider his clothes such a grievance as they were to him at first, and takes kindly to a rough capote for the night. I have just been interrupted by my Rais and one of my men, who came in to display the gorgeous printed calico they have bought, one for his Luxor wife and the other for his betrothed up near Assouan. The latter is about 8 years old, and Hosein has dressed her and paid her expenses these 5 years, as is the custom up in that district. The Rais has bought a silk headkerchief for 9 shillings, but that was in the marriage contract. So I must see and admire and wish good luck to the finery, and to the girls who are to wear it. Then we had a little talk about the prospects of letting the boat, and, Inshallah, making some money for el Gama, i.e. all our company or all of us together. The Rais hopes that the Hogawat will not be too outrageous in their ways, or given to use the stick, as the solution of every difficulty. The young Shurafa of Abu l-Hajjaj came from Gamal Azhar today to bid me good-bye and bring their letters for Luxor. I asked them about the rumours that the Ulema are preaching against the Franks, which is always being said, but they had heard nothing of the sort, and said they had not heard of anything the Franks had done lately which would signify to the Muslims at all. It is not the Franks who press so many soldiers, or levy such heavy taxes 3 months in advance. I will soon write again. I feel rather like the wandering Jew and long for home and rest, without being dissatisfied with what I have, and enjoy, God knows. If I could get better and come home next summer. End of Letter 90. Read by Sybilla Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, Luxor, November 21st, 1866. Dearest Alick, I arrived here on the morning of the 11th. I am a beast not to have written, but I caught cold after 4 days, and have really not been well, so forgive me, and I will narrate and not apologize. We came up best pace, as the boat is a flyer now, only 14 days to Thebes, and to Keneh only 11. Then we had bad winds, and my men pulled away at the rope, and sang the Rais al Rusa, bridegroom going to his bride, and even Omar went and pulled the rope. We were all very merry, and played practical jokes on a rascal who wanted a pound to guide me to the tombs. We made him run miles, fetch innumerable donkeys, and then laughed at his beard. Such is boatman fun. On arriving at Luxor I had a charivari of voices, and I knew I was at home, by the shrill pipe of the little children, El Sit, El Sit. Visitors all day of course, at night comes up another dahabeah, great commotion, as it had been telegraphed from Cairo, which I knew before I left, and was to be stopped. So I coolly said, "O Mustapha, the Indian saint, Wali, is in thine eye, seeing that an Indian is all as one with an Englishman." How did I know there was an Indian and a Wali, etc. Meanwhile the Wali had a bad thumb, and someone told his slave there was a wonderful English doctress, so in the morning he sent for me, and I went inside the hareem. He was very friendly, and made me sit close beside him, told me he was fourth in descent from Abd el Kadir Gilami of Baghdad, but his father settled at Hyderabad, where he has great estates. He said he was a Wali or saint, and would have it that I was on the path of the Darweeshes, gave me medicine for my cough, asked me many questions, and finally gave me $5 and asked if I wanted more. I thanked him heartily, kissed the money politely, and told him I was not poor enough to want it, and would give it in his name to the poor of Luxor, but that I would never forget that the Indian Sheykh had behaved like a brother to an Englishwoman in a strange land. He then spoke in great praise of the laws of the English, and said many more kind things to me, adding again, "I tell thee thou art a darweesh, and do not forget me." Another Indian from Lahore, I believe the Sheykh's tailor, came to see me, an intelligent man, and a Syrian doctor, a manifest scamp. The people here said he was balawar (rope dancer). Well, the authorities detained the boat with fair words till orders came from Keneh to let them go up further. Meanwhile the Sheykh came out and performed some miracles, which I was not there to see, perfuming people's hands by touching them with his, and taking English sovereigns out of a pocketless jacket, and the doctor told wonders of him. Anyhow he spent £10 in one day here, and he is a regular darweesh. He and all the hareem were poorly dressed, and wore no ornaments whatever. I hope Said Abdurrahman will come down safe again, but no one knows what the government wants of him or why he is so watched. It is the first time I ever saw an Oriental travelling for pleasure. He had about 10 or 12 in the hareem, among them his 3 little girls, and perhaps 20 men outside, Indians and Arabs from Syria, I fancy. Next day I moved into the old house, and found one end in ruins, owing to the high Nile and want of repair. However, there is plenty more safe and comfortable. I settled all accounts with my men, and made an inventory in Arabic, which Sheykh Yussuf wrote for me, which we laughed over hugely. How to express a sauce boat, a pie dish, etc., in Arabic was a poser. A genteel Effendi, who sat by, at last burst out in uncontrollable amazement, "There is no God but God! Is it possible that 4 or 5 Franks can use all these things to eat, drink, and sleep on a journey?" N.B. I fear the Franks will think the stock very scanty. Whereupon Master Achmet, with the swagger of one who has seen cities and men, held forth, "Oh, Effendim, that is nothing. Our Lady is almost like the children of the Arabs. 1 dish or 2, a piece of bread, a few dates, and peace, as we say, there is an end of it. But thou shouldst see the merchants of Escandariya (Alexandria) 3 tablecloths, 40 dishes, to each soul 7 plates of all sorts, 7 knives and 7 forks and 7 spoons, large and small, and 7 different glasses for wine and beer and water. It is the will of God, replied the Effendi, rather put down, but, he added, it must be a dreadful fatigue to them to eat their dinner. Then came an impudent merchant who wanted to go down with his bales and 5 souls in my boat for nothing. But I said, O man, she is my property, and I will eat from her of thy money as of the money of the Franks. Whereupon he offered £1, but was bundled out amid general reproaches for his avarice and want of shame. So all the company said a Fatah for the success of the voyage, and Rais Mohammed was exhorted to open his eyes, and he should have a tarbouch if he did well. Then I went to visit my kind friend the Maōhn's wife, and tell her all about her charming daughter and grandchildren. I was, of course, an hour in the streets salaaming, etc. Sharaftina Beledna, thou hast honoured our country on all sides. Blessings come with thee, etc. Everything is cheaper than last year, but there is no money to buy with, and the taxes have grown beyond bearing, as a fellow said, a man can't, we will express it, blow his nose, if you please, the real phrase was less parliamentary, and expressive of something at once ventose and valueless, without a kawas behind him to levy a tax on it. The ha'porth of onions we buy in the market is taxed on the spot, and the fish which the man catches under my window. I paid a tax on buying charcoal, and another on having it weighed. People are terribly beaten to get next year's taxes out of them, which they have not the money to pay. The Nubian M.P.s passed the other day in 3 boats, towed by a steamer, very frightened and sullen. I fell in with some Egyptians on my way, and tried to talk the European style of talk. Now you will help to govern the country, what a fine thing for you, etc. I got such a look of rueful reproach. Laugh not thou at our beards, O Effendim, God's mercy, what words are these? And who is there on the banks of the Nile who can say anything but Hyder, ready, with both hands on the head, and a salaam to the ground even to a mutter, and thou talkest of speaking before Effendina? Art thou mad, Effendim? Of all the vexations, none are more trying than the distinctions which have been inflicted on the unlucky Sheykhs el Beled. In fear and trembling they ate their Effendina's banquet, and sadly paid the bill, and those who have had the Nishan, the order of the Majidi, have had to disburse fees whereat the Lord Chamberlain's staff's mouths might water, and now the wretched delegates to the European Chambers, God save the mark, are going down with their hearts in their shoes. The Nubians say that the Divan is to be held in the citadel, and that the road by which the Memlook Beys left it is not stopped up, though perhaps it goes underground nowadays. November 27th. The first steamer full of travellers has just arrived, and with it the brother of the ladies all wanting my saddle. I forbade Mustapha to send for it, but they intimidate the poor old fellow, and he comes and kisses my hand, not to get him into trouble with one old woman, who says she is the relation of a consul and a great lady in her own country. I am what Mrs. Grote called cake enough to concede to Mustapha's fears what I had sworn to refuse henceforth. Last year 5 women on one steamer all sent for my saddle, besides other things, camp stools, umbrellas, beer, etc., etc. This year I'll bolt the doors when I see a steamer coming. I hear the big people are so angry with the Indian saint because he treated them like dirt everywhere. One great man went with a Mudir to see him, and asked him to sell him a Memlook, a young slave boy. The Indian, who had not spoken or saluted, burst forth, "Be silent, thou wicked one! Dost thou dare to ask me to sell thee a soul to take it with thee to hell?" Fancy the surprise of the distinguished Turk. Never had he heard such language. The story has travelled all up the river, and is of course much enjoyed. Last night Sheykh Yussuf gave an entertainment, killed a sheep, and had a reading of the Sirat el Rasoor, chapter on the Prophet. It was the night of the Prophet's great vision, and is a great night in Islam. I was sorry not to be well enough to go. Now that there is no Kadee here, Sheykh Yussuf has lots of business to settle, and he came to me and said, "Expound to me the laws of marriage and inheritance of the Christians, that I may do no wrong in the affairs of the Copts, for they won't go and be settled by the priest out of the Gospels, and I can't find any laws, except about marriage, in the Gospels." I set him up with the text of the tribute money, and told him to judge according to his own laws, for that Christians had no laws other than those of the country they lived in. Poor Yussuf was sore perplexed about a divorce case. I refused to expound, and told him all the learned in the law in England had not yet settled which text to follow. Do you remember the German story of the lad who travelled das Gruseln zu lernen? Well, I, who never gruselt before, had a touch of it a few evenings ago. I was sitting here quietly drinking tea, and 4 or 5 men were present when a cat came to the door. I called bis, bis, and offered milk, but Pussy, after looking at us, ran away. Well dost thou, O lady, said a quiet sensible man, a merchant here, to be kind to the cat, for I dare say he gets little enough at home; his father, poor man, cannot cook for his children every day. And then, in an explanatory tone to the company, that is Ali Nasiri's boy Yussuf. It must be Yussuf, because his fellow twin Ismaeen is with his mule at Negadeh. Mir gruselte, I confess, not but what I have heard things almost as absurd from gentlemen and ladies in Europe, but an extravagance in a kuftan has quite a different effect from one in a tailcoat. What, my butcher's boy who brings the meat, a cat? I gasped. To be sure, and he knows well where to look for a bit of good cookery, you see. All twins go out as cats at night if they go to sleep hungry, and their own bodies lie at home, like dead, meanwhile, but no one must touch them, or they would die. When they grow up to 10 or 12 they leave it off. Why, your boy Achmet does it. Oh, Achmet, do you go out as a cat at night? No, said Achmet tranquilly, I am not a twin. My sister's sons do. I inquired if people were not afraid of such cats. No, there is no fear, they only eat a little of the cookery, but if you beat them they will tell their parents next day, so and so beat me in his house last night, and show their bruises. No, they are not afrits, they are Beni Adam, sons of Adam. Only twins do it, and if you give them a sort of onion broth and camel's milk the first thing when they are born, they don't do it at all. Omar professed never to have heard of it, but I am sure he had, only he dreads being laughed at. One of the American missionaries told me something like it, as belonging to the Copts, but it is entirely Egyptian, and common to both religions. I asked several Copts who assured me it was true, and told just the same. Is it a remnant of the doctrine of transmigration? However, the notion fully accounts for the horror people feel at the idea of killing a cat. A poor pilgrim from the Black Country was taken ill yesterday at a village 6 miles from here. He could speak only a few words of Arabic, and begged to be carried to the Abab'deh. So the Sheykh el Beled put him on a donkey and sent him and his little boy, and laid him in Sheykh Hassan's house. He called for Hassan and begged him to take care of the child, and to send him to an uncle somewhere in Cairo. Hassan said, "Oh, you will get well, inshallah, etc., and take the boy with you." "I cannot take him into the grave with me," said the black pilgrim. Well, in the night he died, and the boy went to Hassan's mat and said, "Oh Hassan, my father is dead." So the 2 sheikhs and several men got up and went and sat with the boy till dawn, because he refused to lie down or to leave his father's corpse. At daybreak he said, "Take me now and sell me, and buy new cloth to dress my father for the tomb." All the Abab'deh cried when they heard it, and Hassan went and bought the cloth, and some sweet stuff for the boy who remains with him. Such is death on the road in Egypt. I tell it as Hassan's slave told it to me, and somehow we all cried again at the poor little boy rising from his dead father's side to say, "Come now, sell me to dress my father for the tomb." These strange black pilgrims always interest me. Many take 4 years to Mecca and home, and have children born to them on the road, and learn a few words of Arabic. End of Letter 91. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. 2 of Letters from Egypt. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mrs. Ross, Luxor, December 5, 1866. Dearest Janet, I write in answer to yours by the steamer, to go down by the Seine. I fancy I should be quite of your mind about Italy. I hate the return of Europe to the good old rule and ancient plan, that he should take who has the power, and he should keep who can. Nor can I be bullied into looking on might as right. Many thanks for the papers. I am anxious to hear about the Candia business. All my neighbours are sick at heart. The black boy Palgrave left with me is a very good lad, only he can't keep his clothes clean, never having been subject to that annoyance before. He has begun to be affectionate ever since I did not beat him for breaking my only looking glass. I wish an absurd respect for public opinion did not compel him to wear a blue shirt and a tarboosh, his suit. I see it is misery to him. He is a very gentle cannibal. I have been very unwell indeed, and still am extremely weak, but hope I am on the mend. A eunuch here who is a holy man tells me he saw my boat coming up heavily laden in his sleep, which indicates a good let. I hope my reverend friend is right. If you sell any of your things when you leave Egypt, let me have some blankets for the boat. If she is let to a friendly dragoman, he will supply all deficiencies out of his own canteen, but if to one who knows not Joseph, I fear many things will be demanded by right-minded British travellers, which must be left to the Reis's discretion to buy for them. I hope all the Fattah said for the success of the Urania's voyage will produce a due effect. Here we rely a good deal on the favour of Abu'l Hajjaj in such matters. The naivete with which people pray here for money is very amusing, though really I don't know why one shouldn't ask for one's daily sixpence as well as one's daily bread. An idiot of a woman has written me to get her a place as governess in an European or Arabian family in the neighbourhood of Thebes. Considering she has been 6 years in Egypt as she says, she must be well fitted to teach. She had better learn to make gilla and spin wool. The young Americans whom Mr. Hale sent were very nice. The Yankees are always the best bred and educated travellers that I see here. End of letter 92. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, Luxor, December 31st, 1866. Dearest Alick, I meant to have sent you a long yarn by a steamer which went the other day, but I have been in my bed. The weather set in colder than I ever felt it here, and I have been very unwell for some time. Dr. Osman Ibrahim, a friend of mine, an elderly man who studied in Paris in Muhammad Ali's time, wants me to spend the summer up here and take sand baths, i.e., bury myself up to the chin in the hot sand, and to get a Dongola slave to rub me. A most fascinating dervish from Esneh gave me the same advice. He wanted me to go and live near him at Esneh, and let him treat me. I wish you could see Sheikh Salim. He is a sort of remnant of the Memluk Beys, a Circassian who has inherited his master's property up at Esneh, and married his master's daughter. The master was one of the Beys, also a slave inheriting from his master. Well, after being a terrible shaitan after drink, women, etc., Salim has repented and become a man of pilgrimage and prayer and perpetual fasting, but he has retained the exquisite grace and charm of manner which must have made him irresistible in his shaitan days, and also the beautifully delicate style of dress, a dove-coloured cloth sibba over a pale blue silk kaftan, a turban like a snowdrift, under which flowed the silky fair hair and beard, and the dainty white hands under the long muslin shirt-sleeve made a picture, and such a smile, and such ready graceful talk. Sheykh Yussuf brought him to me as a sort of doctor, and also to try and convert me on one point. Some Christians had made Yussuf quite miserable, by telling him of the doctrine that all unbaptized infants went to eternal fire, and, as he knew that I had lost a child very young, it weighed on his mind that perhaps I fretted about this, and so he could not refrain from trying to convince me that God was not so cruel and unjust as the Nazarene priests represented him, and that all infants whatsoever, as well as ignorant persons, were to be saved. Would that I could take the cruel error out of the minds of all the hundreds and thousands of poor Christian mothers who must be tortured by it, said he, and let them understand that their dead babies are with him who sent and took them. I own I did not resent this interference with my orthodoxy, especially as it is the only one I ever knew Yussuf to attempt. Dr. Osman is a lecturer in the Cairo School of Medicine, a Shereef, and eminently a gentleman. He came up in the passenger steamer and called on me and spent all his spare time with me. I liked him better than the bewitching dervish Salim, he is so like my old love Don Quixote. He was amazed and delighted at what he heard here about me. Ah, madame, on vous aime comme une sœur, et on vous respecte comme une reine, cela réjouit la cour des honnêtes gens de voir tous les préjugés oubliés et détruire à ce point. We had no end of talk. Osman is the only Arab I know who has read a good deal of European literature and history and is able to draw comparisons. He said, "Vous seuls dans toute l'Égypte connaissez le peuple et comprenez ce qui s'y passe. Tous les autres Européens ne savent absolument rien que les héros. Il n'y a que vous qui ayez inspiré la confiance qu'il faut pour connaître la vérité." Of course this is between ourselves, I tell you, but I don't want to boast of the kind thoughts people have of me, simply because I am decently civil to them. In Egypt we are eaten up with taxes; there is not a penny left to anyone. The taxes for the whole year 8 months in advance have been levied, as far as they can be beaten out of the miserable people. I saw one of the poor dancing girls the other day (there are 3 in Luxor), and she told me how cruel the new tax on them is. It is left to the discretion of the official who farms it to make each woman pay according to her presumed gains, i.e. her good looks, and thus the poor women are exposed to all the caprices and extortions of the police. This last new tax has excited more disgust than any. "We now know the name of our ruler," said a fellah who had just heard of it; "he is Mawash Pasha." I won't translate, but it is a terrible epithet when uttered in a tone which gives it the true meaning, though in a general way the commonest word of abuse to a donkey or a boy or to any other cattle. The wages of prostitution are unclean, and this tax renders all government salaries unlawful according to strict law. The capitation tax, too, which was remitted for 3 years on the Pasha's accession to the people of Cairo, Alexandria, Damietta and Rashid, is now called for. Omar will have to pay about £8 back tax, which he had fondly imagined himself excused from. You may conceive the distress this must cause among artisans, etc., who have spent their money and forgotten it, and feel cheated out of the blessings they then bestowed on the Pasha. As to that they will take out the change in curses. There was a meeting here the other day of the Kadee, Sheykh el Beled, and other notables to fix the amount of tax each man was to pay towards the increased police tax, and the old Shereef at the end spoke up, and said he had heard that one man had asked me to lend him money, and that he hoped such a thing would not happen again. Everyone knew I had heavy expenses this year, and most likely had not much money; that my heart was soft, and that as everyone was in distress it would be breaking my head, and in short, that he should think it unmanly if anyone tried to trouble a lone woman with his troubles. I did offer one man £2 that he might not be forced to run away to the desert, but he refused it and said, "I had better go at once and rob out there, and not turn rogue against thee." Never could I repay it. The people are running away in all directions. When the moolid of the Sheykh came the whole family Abu'l Hajjaj could only raise 620 piastres among them to buy the buffalo cow, which by custom, strong as the laws of the Medes and Persians, must be killed for the strangers who come, and a buffalo cow is worth 1,000 piastres. So the stout old Shereef, aged 87, took his staff and the 620 piastres, and sallied forth to walk to Erment and see what God would send them, and a charitable woman in Erment did give a buffalo cow for the 620 piastres, and he drove her home the 20 miles rejoicing. There has been a burglary over at Gherna, an unheard of event. Some men broke into the house of the Coptic Gabit, tax gatherer, and stole the money box containing about 60 purses, over £150. The Gabit came to me sick with the fright which gave him jaundice, and about 8 men are gone in chains to Keneh on suspicion. Hajji Baba, too, a Turkish cawass, is awfully bilious; he says he is sick from beating men, and it's no use, you can't coin money on their backs and feet when they haven't a para in the world. Altogether everyone is gloomy, and many desperate. I never saw the aspect of a population so changed. January 1st, 1867. God bless you, dearest Alick, and grant you many good years more. I must finish this to go to morrow by the steamer. I would give a great deal to see you again, but when will that be? End of letter 93, read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff Gordon, Luxor, January 12, 1867. DEAREST Alick, only 2 days ago I received letters from you of the 17th September and the 19th November. I wonder how many get lost and where. Janet gives me hopes of a visit of a few days in March and promises me a little terrier dog, whereat Omar is in raptures. I have made no plans at all, never having felt well enough to hope to be able to travel. The weather has changed for the better, and it is not at all cold now. We shall see what the warmth does for me. You make my bowels yearn with your account of Rainey. If only we had Prince Achmet's carpet, and you could all come here for a few months. We were greatly excited here last week. A boy was shot out in the sugar cane field. He was with 4 Copts, and at first it looked ugly for the Copts. But the Maōhn tells me he is convinced they are innocent, and that they only prevaricated from fear. It was robbers that shot the poor child. What stuck and surprised me in the affair was the excessive horror and consternation it produced. The Maōhn had not had a murder in his district at all in 8 years. The market place was thronged with wailing women. Omar was sick all day, and the Maōhn pale and wretched. The horror of killing seems greater here than I ever saw it. Palgrave says the same of the Arabian Arabs in his book. It is not one's notion of Oriental feeling, but a murder in England is taken quite as a joke compared with the scene here. I fear there will be robberies, owing to the distress, and the numbers who are running away from the land unable to pay their taxes. Don't fear for me, for I have 2 watchmen in the house every night, the regular guard and an amateur, a man whose boy I took down to Cairo to study in Gamal Azhar. Palgrave has written to Ross wanting Mabrook back. I am very sorry, the more so as Mabrook is recalcitrant. I want to stay with thee, I don't want to go back to the Nazarene. A boy who heard him said, but the lady is a Nazarene too, whereupon Mabrook slapped his face with great vigour. He will be troublesome if he does turn restive, and he is one who can only be managed by kindness. He is as good and quiet as possible with us, but the stubborn will is there, and he is too ignorant to be reasoned with. January 14th. Today the 4 Copts have again changed their story, and after swearing that the robbers were strangers, have accused a man who has shot birds for me all this winter, and the poor devil is gone to Keneh in chains. The weather seems to have set in steadily for fine. I hope soon to get out, but my donkey has grown old and shaky and I am too weak to walk, so I sit in the balcony. End of Letter 94. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mrs. Austen, Luxor, January 14, 1867. Dearest Mutter, we have had a very cold winter and I have been constantly ailing. Luckily the cough has transferred itself from the night to the day, and I get some good sleep. The last 2 days have been much warmer and I hope matters will mend. I am beginning to take cod liver oil, as we can't find a milch camel anywhere. My boat has been well let in Cairo and is expected here every day. The gentlemen shoot, and tell the crew not to row, and in short take it easy, and give them £2 in every place. Imagine what luxury for my crew. I shall have to dismiss the lot, they will be so spoiled. The English Consul General came up in a steamer with Dr. Patterson and Mr. Francis. I dined with them one day. I wish you could have seen me carried in my armchair high up on the shoulders of 4 men, like a successful candidate, or more like one of the pharaohs in an ancient bas-relief, preceded by torch-bearers and other attendants and followers. My procession was quite regal. I wish I could show you a new friend of mine, Osman Ibrahim, who studied medicine 5 years in Paris. My heart warmed to him directly, because, like most high-bred Arabs, he is so like Don Quixote, only Don Quixote quite in his senses. The sort of innocent sententiousness, and perfectly natural love of fine language and fine sentiments, is unattainable to any European, except, I suppose, a Spaniard. It is quite unlike Italian fustian or French sentiment. I suppose to most Europeans it is ridiculous, but I used to cry when the carriers beat the most noble of all knights, when I was a little girl and read Don Quixote, and now I feel as it were like Sancho when I listen to Osman reciting bits of heroic poetry, or uttering wise saws and modern instances, with the peculiar mixture of strong sense of exultation which stamps the great Don. I may not repeat all I heard from him of the state of things here, and the insults he had to endure—a Shereef and an educated man—from coarse Turkish Pashas; it was the carriers over again. He told me he had often cried like a woman, at night in his own room, at the miseries he was forced to witness and could do nothing to relieve. All the men I have particularly liked, I find, are more or less pupils of the Sheykh el Bagooree, now dead, who seems to have had the gift of inspiring honourable feeling. Our good Maōhn is one; he is no conjurer, but the honesty and goodness are heroic which lead a man to starve on £15 a month when he is expected to grow rich on plunder. The war in Crete saddens many a household here. Sheykh Yussuf's brother, Sheykh Youress, is serving there, and many more. People are actually beginning to say, 'We hope the English and French won't fight for the Sultan if the Muscovites want to eat him; there will be no good for us till the Turks are driven out.' All the old religious devotion to the Sultan seems quite gone. Poor Mustapha has been very unwell, and I stopped his Ramadan, gave him some physic and ordered him not to fast, for which I think he is rather grateful. The Imám and Mufti always endorse my prohibitions of fasting to my patients. Old Ismaeen is dead, aged over 100; he served Belzoni, and when he grew doting was always wanting me to go with him to join Belzoni at Abu Simbel. He was not at all ill, he only went out like a candle. His grandson brought me a bit of the meat cooked at his funeral and begged me to eat it, that I might live to be very old, according to the superstition here. When they killed the buffalo for the Sheykh Abu'l Hajjaj, the man who had a right to the feet kindly gave them to Omar, who wanted to make calf's foot jelly for me. I had a sort of profane feeling, as if I were eating a descendant of the bull Apis. I am reading Madame du Deffand's letters. What a repulsive picture of a woman! I don't know which I dislike most, Horace Walpole or herself. The conflict of selfishness, vanity and ennui disguised as sentiment is quite hateful. To her Turgot was un seul animal, so much for her great gifts. Remember me kindly to William, and tell him how much I wish I could see his improvements. Omar also desires his salaam to him, having a sort of fellow feeling for your faithful henchman. I need not say he kisses your hand most dutifully. End of Letter 95. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information please visit LibriVox.org.